Today we're not talking about critical thinking. We're talking about the opposite of critical thinking. We're
Sure.
talking about QAnon. Okay, so let me start
Are
off this by yeah. Go ahead.
you
What you
well,
got?
I was gonna say, are you gonna try and sell QAnon to me? Are you
Oh
gonna
no
try and
no
make
no
me
no no
Oh, okay.
no no.
Fine. That's
Well,
fine.
you don't know this because you haven't been on. This is you're just now becoming a host. I've talked about QAnon on this program before. In
Okay,
fact,
great. Great.
I've made calls to action on this program before for other people to talk about QAnon because, quite frankly, I don't think skeptics in the space have talked about QAnon enough for my liking.
That's
I
fair.
actually think that in some ways it is a more direct problem in people's lives than Christianity can be sometimes,
Yeah,
which is
right.
pretty wild. Obviously we have a lot of big focus on Christianity. It's not the only religion we sort of deconstruct here, but it is the most common one in the United
Mhm,
States and mostly in the world that we occupy. At least people I talk to.
mhm.
So QAnon is kind of this subset of Christianity in some ways, but also it is a religious movement within itself, and has a very complicated history. I've talked about a little bit of that history before on some previous episodes, but there's a reason why I want to kind of talk about QAnon again, and that's because of an attack that happened last week. If you're familiar, John, Paul Pelosi, who is the husband of Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House,
Mhm. Yeah.
was attacked in his home by a man named David DePappy with a hammer who were
Mhm.
shouting, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" He was trying to assault Nancy Pelosi and presumably kidnap her as well. He had like zip ties and stuff, right?
Right.
And the details of what actually happened, like fully got released today, which I'm not going to read all of it, but it is pretty wild. This man is an interesting dude, to say the least. But it's a people have already said, of course, oh, there's no way that he is doing what he thinks he is. It must be an op. He must be the secret, gay prostitute of Paul Pelosi because people want to ignore the reality that this was a man who is in the right wing conspiracy ecosphere that has been bubbling in this country for the past I don't know at least decade. I mean, it really goes farther than that. But as far as like internet culture, I mean, it's really taken off in the past, like decade or so. It's
Mhm.
I want to bring your attention to a quote here that I've got. In the months, this is from the LA Times talking about this, right? So, in the months before police accused him of attacking House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband Friday morning, David DePape had been drifting further into the world of far right conspiracies, anti Semitism, and hate, according to a Times review of his online accounts. In a personal blog that DePape maintained, his posts included such topics as manipulation of history, hollow hoax, and it's okay to be white. He mentioned 4chan, a favorite message board of the far right. He posted videos about conspiracies involving COVID-19 vaccines and the war in Ukraine being a ploy for Jewish people to buy land. DePape's screeds include posts about QAnon, an unfounded theory that former President Trump is at war with a cabal of Satan worshipping elites who run a child sex ring and control the world. In an August 23rd entry titled Q, DePape wrote, either Q is Trump himself or Q is the deep state moles within Trump's inner circle. Now, I said this back in the election of 2021. I said it after the fact, and I'll say it again. Q did not end and will not end and hasn't ended from the 2020 election, right? The 2020 election was sort of the supposed to be the end point, right, for a lot of Q conspiracies. There are a lot of people that were pointing to this idea and saying, "Oh, once the election happens, Trump is going to be, doing all this stuff. All these secret indictments are going to come out." But of course, it didn't happen because none of that's real. But that didn't mean that Q was going to go away. In fact, people are still believers in Q. And while, yeah, of course, there's people who don't believe it anymore, the movement is still ongoing and it's still going to keep going, which I think is incredibly fascinating. We've talked about this before a little bit, but there's documented evidence of people who are part of communities that bring a sense of identity and a sense of purpose so strongly that they don't want to give up the beliefs of it. So there's a big study done on this back in the 1970s on a UFO cult that talks about this phrase called cognitive dissonance. You may have heard
Mhm.
of this before.
Hmm.
This researcher came up with this by studying this cult when a UFO cult was supposed to be taken up into the stars that night, but then it didn't. But then they still kept believing in the aliens and stuff, and that the date kept getting pushed back. Right? It's the exact same stuff you see in Christian circles talking about the upcoming rapture, and we see the same thing here at Q. And as a result of these beliefs, there's a lot of direct harm that comes in the world. So much, in fact, I've compiled a timeline here of some real world crimes outside of the one that just happened last week. John, you look like you have something to say. What you got?
No, I'm completely shocked that there's a timeline of massive events.
Yeah.
I'm well, I feel like I'm gonna put this on and I want to learn about QAnon.
What is that? What
This
is
is the
that,
clown
John?
nose. It's a clown. And why do I have this? I don't know. But teach me.
For the audio listeners at home, John just put on a cloud nose inexplicably. I think that's a Q John is what I'm going to call that.
Q John.
Q
Oh,
John.
this we're not starting another religion tonight, Dan.
No, not tonight.
Let's not.
It is kind of interesting because I mean, the Q phenomenon is not old, right? Compared to like most religious traditions, it's not old. It started in, I mean, pretty much November of 2017. Okay, and there's already been so much traction that's happened because of this, not just in the United States, globally, actually, and we'll probably get to that in a bit. But I have to be mindful of time because, again, I don't know if I can cover everything that I have on this list here of everything that's happened, but I'm going to talk about some major ones. So here's the first major thing that's happened, okay, that happened to this was in 2018, okay? In May of 2018, Michael Lewis Arthur Meyer live streamed a Facebook video from the site of a Tucson cement plant asserting that this is a child sex trafficking camp that no one wants to talk about, that no one wants to do nothing about. And the video was viewed 650,000 times over the ensuing week. Tucson police inspected the plant without finding evidence of criminal activity, and Meyer then occupied a tower on the property for 9 days until reaching agreement with police to leave. He later returned to the tower in July, whereupon he was arrested for trespassing. Meyer referenced QAnon and the hashtag where we go one, we go all hashtag on his Facebook page. Okay, so that's the first sort of quasi criminal activity that's
Oh my
happening there.
word.
You see that, and it's like, okay, that's one guy, right? This one guy, and he has a belief. What's up with that? Okay, yeah, that's weird, but is that mean a movement? That's the first of about 20 things I have on on this list here.
Oh.
I mean, it's a lot. And it
Oh.
it doesn't get better. I'll tell you that. I think that's probably the mildest thing on this list. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Oh no.
There's a lot. So again, I'm just going to go over some of the highlights. Okay. And here's another big one. This is one that caught, I think, the most mainstream media attention at the time that really brought more people to QAnon. This was the Hoover Dam incident that happened. Okay. So in 2018, sorry, I'm on the wrong part. Let me go back to this list. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that I got
It
here.
seems like it picked up a lot of traction as well during the pandemic because people were forced to stay in at home and had a lot
It,
of time to spend on the internet and were reading things and going,
yes.
"Oh, this could be true. This gives me some hope."
I think the pandemic complicated things because, like I said, QAnon is a very loose movement of ideas. I think that's how it thrives in its looseness. When
Right.
people can adapt it as something being QAnon related or not, it's sort of this amalgamation of different things. It really is a pick and choose which things you like and which things you don't like kind of movement.
Like the Bible.
Yeah, or stochastic terrorism. I mean, like,
Oh,
yeah, it
yeah.
works both ways. It's
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean, like the thing with Christian traditions, there are denominations, but at least they have like written charters. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like at
Sure.
least like you can, there's a general hierarchy. Like QAnon really doesn't have a hierarchy. The only hierarchy is Q. Like that is it. And even who Q actually is pretty suspect. I don't
Right.
have time to talk about even that part of it, but I did find my place here. Talking about the Hoover Dam, and said this was June 15th, 2018. Matthew Philip Wright of Henderson, Nevada, was arrested on terrorism and other charges for driving an armored truck containing an AR-15 and handgun to the Hoover Dam and blocking traffic for 90 minutes. He said he was on a mission involving QAnon to demand that the Justice Department release the OIG report. If I have time, we'll get to that. That's the thing with Q, right? Every 5 seconds, there's like deep lore that
Right.
you have to kind of get into. The OIG report on the conduct of FBI agents during the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. Since a copy of the Office of the Inspector General report has been released the day before, the man had been motivated by a Q drop, which claimed the released version of the report had been heavily modified and that Trump possessed a more damning version but had declined to release it. In video recorded inside his armored truck, Wright expressed disappointment that Trump had not honored a duty to look certain people up, asking him to uphold your oath. After blocking traffic, Wright drove towards the Arizona side of the bridge where his tires were flattened by police spike strips. He then surrendered to police after becoming stuck on a dirt road. Nobody was injured during the incident. At trial, Wright was found guilty, and on December 17, 2020, he was sentenced to 7 years on a terrorism charge and 9 months for unlawful flight to be served consecutively. And it gets worse.
Oh my
Re-
word.
I mean, God, what do we got? It's 7:14, man. Let's talk about some of the kidnapping. In December 2019, Cynthia Abtug was arrested and charged in Colorado with conspiracy to commit second-degree kidnapping of one of her children who had been removed from her custody. Her other daughter reported to police that Abtug had been collaborating with an armed male who was definitely part of this group QAnon, and that her mother had gone to QAnon meetings and believed that child had been taken by evil Satan worshippers and pedophiles. Abtug pleaded not guilty to the charge in September 2020, was trialed in February 2021. On March 20th, 2020, Neely Petrie Blankard was arrested and charged with kidnapping and custodial interference after taking her two daughters, who had been in the sole legal custody of their grandmother. Petrie Blankard had made multiple social media posts promoting QAnon, including memes and pictures of her wearing QAnon shirts at Trump rallies. She also taken actions connected with the sovereign citizen movement and had become actively involved with the E-Clause, a QAnon-affiliated sovereign citizen pseudo-law firm. In October 2020, Utah mother Emily Jolly abducted her son during a supervised visit, despite the fact that the boy's father had full custody of him. She had promoted QAnon conspiracies, including alleging that Child Protective Services had been involved in human trafficking and was a member of a Facebook page for E-Clause. On April 13th, 2021, a French group influenced by QAnon theories and by a local version of sovereign citizen ideology helped the non-custodial mother abduct her 8-year-old child from the child's grandmother, who had been awarded custody due to the concerns over the mother's mental stability and extreme conspiratorial beliefs. The investigation about the people involved in the kidnapping eventually led to the uncovering of an alleged terrorist conspiracy. Ooh, so fun stuff there. Questions so far, John?
Uh, I'm noticing a few things, and you said it earlier that people thought that potentially Trump was Q,
Correct.
which we can debunk that straight away because he can't even spell coffee.
That's
So,
true.
I'm going to say that's not him. This whole mentality of getting in there first before somebody gets you is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
There are some things you can believe in that probably aren't as damaging as this whole QAnon subset. If you're going to believe in something strange, at least make it like flat Earth where nobody can really get hurt from it. Th-
Yeah. I think that's a thing I feel too, right? It's
Yeah.
like there are like obviously people who have weird out there beliefs, but like a lot of them are probably harmless, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like,
Mhm.
if their beliefs aren't necessarily tied to their criminal actions,
Right.
whereas you can make a direct link to at least all the cases I've made so far,
Sure.
that there's an ideology that's informing sort of these attacks that
Mhm.
that happen there, and we
It's
haven't even gotten to the
scary.
murders yet, John.
Oh,
I'm just
what?
oh yeah. Let's
Oh.
yeah, it's kind of sad. It's not really good. So, Matthew Taylor Coleman, on like August 12th, 2021, a follower of QAnon and a father of two was charged with murdering his two children, a 2-year-old son and 10-month-old daughter, with a spearfishing gun in Mexico. The suspect, identified as 40-year-old Matthew Taylor Coleman, fled back to U.S. after the murders and was arrested there. He claimed that he was enlightened by QAnon and other alleged delusions that his wife carried and passed on serpent DNA to his kids, which compelled Coleman to take them to Mexico and murder them to prevent them from growing into monsters. Coleman is in a Californian prison pending trial for his killings. Um, yeah.
Where does
So,
that
like,
theory even come from? How do you even get the idea that your children have DNA from a completely different species? Uh,
well, there is a subset in the conspiracy movement that does talk about chimera beings, right? So
Sure,
that
okay,
there are
lizard
people.
people and yeah,
So the abortion, right? So a lot of people know this. They've cloned an aborted fetus back in the 70s that's currently used for stem cell research, right? That's like that. This same fetal tissue's been used for like a long time, right?
right.
They think that that's evidence that they've been doing experiments with human beings and animals tied together to make like chimera beings and stuff. And all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, right? So like that in of itself is not a major Q thing, but it's
Right.
still tied in this circle. That's what's so hard about pinning this thing down
Mhm.
is that obviously a man who does something like that, I mean, they have some severe mental issues, right? There is mental illness that is definitely a component of a lot of this. But like
Right.
there's a lot of mentally ill people that don't commit crimes, that
Mhm.
function and live in society and are just fine. Like
Yeah.
the thing this belief, like, does motivate action in some way. Like, if you
Uh-huh.
sincerely believe that your kids are gonna turn into monsters because of some sort of serpentine, I mean, like, I don't know, like, that causes people to act in a certain way, right?
Yeah. And there are ways to get help when you have these kinds of thoughts as well. You don't have to go and
Yes,
murder your children. Go and
yes,
get the help.
and it's very sad, and I, point of order here as well. I when I bring these when I talk about these beliefs, when I bring this for discussion, what I intend to do is to dissect and hopefully rehabilitate
Mhm.
people of these beliefs in some way.
Mhm.
I don't want to make fun of people in a
No.
traditional sense. I don't want to insult people and say, look how dumb these people are for believing in something. Because for some people, like if you do suffer from something like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, like that is going to be something that's going to influence your train of thought. And that's not something you can necessarily help all the time, right? So it's like I think we have a duty to help people who are
Absolutely.
mentally ill and make sure that we help them figure out what's real from what's not real,
Mhm.
at least to that degree of of instability, right? Like
Right.
again, I'm not stereotyping people and saying everybody who
No.
has mental illness is this, or like I most of us here probably have mental illness in one form or another, right? So
Sure.
anyway, that's a point of order here because like there's some really messed up stuff here. Let's talk about a weird one here. I told you I'd bring about some stuff from around the world. I already mentioned some French ones. Here's one that happened earlier this year in Tokyo. There was a break-in at Tokyo Vaccination Center. A Japanese QAnon affiliated group called Yamato Q waged an online disinformation campaign against the COVID-19 vaccine rollout in Japan. They were claiming that the coronavirus did not exist and that vaccinations were part of a plan to decrease the population through the administration of harmful substances. And on April 7th, 2022, 12 members of Yamato Q trespassed into a Shibuya healthcare clinic that provided COVID 19 vaccine shots, and four of them were immediately arrested by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. And the group's leader was also arrested as well. So there's groups all over the world
Wow.
that
Do you
are leading movements.
remember,
Yeah.
when the vaccine rollout was happening, that there were some folks who, believed that sometime I think it was October just gone, sometime in October 2022, all of the vaccines that have been injected would trigger, and that's when everybody who
Yes.
had the vaccine was gonna die.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
thing, right?
That was the thing that's happened multiple times.
Sure.
I heard last month that all the power was supposed to go out too on a certain
Oh,
day. I mean,
really?
like, these kinds of rolling dates also tend
Yeah.
to
It's
happen a
another
lot in
rapture.
Q. Like, the thing about Q and these Q drops too is, Q figured out pretty early on, well, somewhat early on. Later on, there was some ones that did include times that were wrong.
Mhm.
But for most of the posts, they kind of figured out not to post specific dates or times
Sure.
and to be very vague because whenever they did post specific times, like shit just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like it just,
Huh.
and so,
Funny
you
that.
know, they kind of had to, play with the expectations of their audience a little bit.
Yeah.
I talked about well, we talked about identity earlier, but like, people who are dissecting Q drops, which are, the posts that Q makes on 8chan, which eventually gets disseminated into content aggregators. They call themselves bakers, these people, right?
Right.
Because they're baking. It's this whole kind of metaphor that they got going on. There's breadcrumbs that Q is leaving, and so they're the
Right.
bakers, which isn't how
Okay.
breadcrumbs work. You don't cook breadcrumbs, but like, it
No.
doesn't make any sense. They have this all kind of language. They have this kind of secret society that they've built themselves that gives them a sense of purpose that makes them feel like, oh man, I know the truth and I am going to figure this out and be the hero in this sort of made up story that they
Mhm.
have. So whenever you're a part of a community like that and you're like, "Oh, I predicted this thing was gonna happen," and then it kind of did, like, that's gonna
Yeah.
give you a sense of, "Wow, this thing is more real," than, than what it really is. I don't know what to tell
Sure.
you.
That's
Yeah.
terrifying.
It is really sad. Again, there are so many things on this list here that I have. I can't even get to it, but let's talk about the big one. Okay.
Okay.
In 2021, January 6th, rioters were seen either wearing clothing with Q related emblems or identified as QAnon followers at the storming of the Capitol, the United States, right? Ashley Babbitt was a rioter who was shot dead by police as she was trying to get into the speaker's lobby and was an adherent of QAnon. On the day of the attack, she had retweeted a message from conspiracy theory attorney L. Linwood, which called for the immediate resignation of Mike Pence, Rod Rosenstein, John Roberts, and for the indictment of the first two. One of the most notable participants in the riots was Jake Angeli, whose presence was widely reported by the media because of his shamanic attire and war paints. Angeli, known also as the QAnon shaman, was a known QAnon supporter who had participated in various protests. And on January 12th, Facebook and Twitter announced that they were removing the Stop the Steal content and suspending 70,000 QAnon focused accounts, respectively. And on April 19th, 2021, the Sufon Center reported that Sufon Center is a national defense think tank, reported that Russia and China had amplified and weaponized QAnon stories around the time of the storming of the Capitol to sow societal discord and even compromise legitimate political processes. So make no mistake about it. When you look at footage from the Capitol riots on January 6, 2021, you see Q flags, you see Q t shirts, you see people who definitely believe in Q and who are there because of that belief. There's a lot of people who will try and say, oh, this is actually Antifa in disguise, like pretending to be a controlled opposition. But if you listen to the people who were there and who were being tried, like they will tell you why they were there. And there's interviews and people, going to court over this stuff who will still say that they were there for this particular reason. You know, that happened. I don't know. People kind of forget. I mean, they don't forget. I mean, people are still talking about it. There's a whole committee going on, but like that's a very Q specific thing. It's not just a general conspiracy thing. Like if I sincerely wonder if Q hadn't really started in November of 2017, if the Capitol riots would have even happened at
Huh.
all.
Wow.
I think the connection is that strong, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot more on this timeline, but if you want some more information, Wikipedia has a great link that talks about a lot of the some of the major events and stuff, which help me source a lot of this stuff.
Uh-huh.
And of course, ongoing developments and research on Q are happening by a lot of different content creators or that definitely deserve more spotlight. So support your local Q skeptics. Yes.
That wow.
Um,
And
yeah.
that's just skimming the surface. All
Oh yeah.
that,
There's
and we
more.
barely even touched
There's
it.
more.
That's insane.
I touched on some highlights,
Yeah.
but more murder, more political dissidents,
More
more
people
people that
harming
are
their families because they're
yeah,
worried about certain things. It's
yeah.
yeah.
Another one that you should look at, and I sent this to John a few days ago,
Yeah.
was there is a subreddit called QAnon Casualties, which is great
Mhm.
because it provides a place for people who have family members and loved ones to share some of their experiences with Q, and specifically, Q believers, right? And like those new posts that are in that subreddit pretty much every day, and it is really sad to see how far this thing has come from just
Mhm.
a random post on 4chan to one of the most probably most prolific, one of the most important religious movements of the 21st century so far in
Mhm.
terms of politics. I mean, like it really has changed the game in a lot of ways in how we understand how people operate and with the internet as just this catalyst for these ideas that we haven't really had a good idea to control so far. It does make me wonder what the next 10 years of politics are going to look
Mhm.
like. Is it going to be more in misinformation like this that people will capitalize on, or are we going to find ways to strongly regulate this kind of information from even getting out in the first place? I don't know. There's a lot of debate on it still, but quite frankly, I do think that uh, at least on Twitter and Facebook's account, too little, too late for a lot of the stuff that they did for taking down groups and stuff like that. I mean, this stuff was going on for way too long,
Of
and
course, Twitter's all
you
up in
know,
the air now as well with
yeah,
the change of ownership.
yeah.
Is that going to be policed as well as it was before? Or is it
Who knows? Who
yeah.
knows? Who knows? But yeah, Q still out there. It didn't die in 2020.
Hmm.
It's still happening. Still
If anything,
happening.
it got bigger.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. So I've read some different things about. It's hard to know exactly how many
Sure.
people count as Q. I've read different numbers for different things. I haven't come to like a good timeline to see. Are there more
Okay.
people now than before?
Mhm.
And it's also hard because you have to figure out what does it mean to call someone a Q person? What if
Sure.
they don't believe Q is like actually Donald Trump, but they believe something else? Maybe they believe a related conspiracy theory that came from Q. Does that make them a Q
Got it.
follower? Like it becomes way more complicated really, really
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's it. I have to close it on the deep dive because again, my deep dives were taking way too long. But
That
I
was
mean, they are deep dives, right? So
that was deep.
it's
I would
something.
applaud you, but I don't wanna blow the microphone. But,
No, it's I
internally,
mean,
I'm applauding you.